It was a crisp autumn morning in New York, the city awake with its usual flurry of activity. Emma Williams, CEO of her own thriving media company, stood at her office window, watching as the leaves outside danced in the wind. The skyline of Manhattan gleamed in the distance, a testament to the life she had built, a life of ambition, success, and independence. But for all her achievements, Emma felt a gnawing emptiness inside. The kind of emptiness that no corporate victory or financial reward could fill. At 45, with a flourishing career and no real family to speak of, Emma sometimes wondered if she had sacrificed too much for her work. She had poured herself into her business, driven by the desire to make something of herself after the heartbreak of her failed marriage at 30. She had chosen ambition over love, and now, years later, she couldn't help but wonder if that choice had been worth it. Her phone buzzed, breaking her reverie. It was an unfamiliar number from a small town in the South. "Hello, this is Emma Williams." "Ms. Williams." The voice on the other end was tentative, unsure. "This is Dr. Nelson from Southwell Memorial Hospital in Beaufort, Georgia. I'm afraid I have some bad news. A man named Jake Carter has been in a car accident. He's been asking for you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Jake Carter. The name echoed in her mind, dredging up memories she had long buried. Jake had been her best friend, her first love, when they were children in their small town in the South. They'd grown up together, shared countless summer nights, and dreamed of a future beyond the confines of their sleepy town. But life had a way of pulling people in different directions. She had left for New York right after high school, chasing her dreams, leaving Jake and their small town behind. They hadn't spoken in years. No letters, no calls. Just silence, as the distance between them grew, geographically and emotionally. I didn't even know Jake was still in Beaufort," Emma murmured, her mind racing. Is he okay?" "He's alive, but it's serious. He's asking for you. If you could come, it would mean a lot to him." Emma felt a chill run through her, a mix of concern and confusion. She hadn't thought about Jake in so long, but hearing his name again brought back a flood of emotions she wasn't prepared to face. Her chest tightened as she glanced out the window again, the weight of her decision looming over her. She had no idea what to expect from seeing him again, or what it would mean for her life. But in that moment, one thing was clear: she couldn't ignore it. She couldn't ignore him. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Emma said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. The flight south. The next morning, Emma found herself boarding a plane bound for Georgia. The flight felt surreal, as though she were moving through time, back to a place she had long since outgrown. She had changed so much since she last saw Jake, and yet, a part of her still felt connected to that younger version of herself. The carefree girl who had spent every summer with Jake, talking about everything and nothing, believing that the future would always hold more promise than the present. But that was before life had intervened, before dreams had been crushed, and before she had learned the hard lessons of independence and self-reliance. The flight was short, and soon Emma found herself stepping off the plane into the warm, familiar air of the South. The small airport in Beaufort was a stark contrast to the bustling terminals of New York. Everything here felt slower, quieter, as if time itself had taken a breath and settled into a comfortable rhythm. She took a deep breath, pulling herself together. The hospital was just a short drive away. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, but she pushed it aside. She had a mission: Jake needed her. The reunion. Emma arrived at Southwell Memorial Hospital and was quickly escorted to Jake's room. The sterile hospital smell was overpowering, but Emma barely noticed it. Her focus was entirely on what lay ahead. She paused outside his room, her heart pounding. She had no idea what to expect. Would he look the same? Would the years of separation have changed him as much as they had changed her? She stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, before pushing the door open. Jake was lying in the bed, his body bruised and bandaged, his face pale. He was awake though, and when he saw her, his expression shifted. At first, there was confusion, then recognition, followed by a slow, hesitant smile. "Emma." His voice was raspy, weak, but it still carried the same warmth she remembered. Emma's throat tightened as she stepped closer. "Jake," she whispered, her voice shaking. It felt so surreal to see him again, after all these years. The last time she had seen him, they had been just teenagers, full of dreams and hopes. Now here he was, broken but alive, and calling out to her. You're really here, he said softly, his eyes searching hers. I didn't know what to expect, Emma replied, sitting down by his bed. How are you feeling? I've been better, Jake said with a chuckle that ended in a wince. But it's good to see you, Emma. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't think you'd actually come. Emma's heart ached. He sounded so vulnerable, so lost in that moment, and it broke her to realize how much time had passed without any real connection between them. The years of silence between them had been a wound neither had wanted to acknowledge, and yet here they were, two people who had once been inseparable, now strangers in many ways. But as she looked at him, she realized that the love they had once shared had never truly disappeared. It had just been buried, waiting to be rediscovered. You've always been hard to forget, Emma said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake smiled weakly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. And you've always been impossible to forget. The days following Emma's arrival in Beaufort passed in a blur. She spent every moment at the hospital with Jake, but the longer she stayed, the more she realized how little she truly knew about the man he had become. He had changed. He was no longer the carefree, wild-eyed boy she had once loved, but a man burdened by time, hardship, and the weight of his past. They spent hours talking about the years that had passed since they last saw each other. Jake shared bits and pieces of his life, how he had stayed in Beaufort, working in construction, and how a car accident years ago had left him physically scarred, though he never let it stop him from pursuing his work. He talked about the loss of his parents when he was in his late 20s, how their passing had hit him harder than he ever expected, and how it changed him in ways he couldn't fully understand. Emma listened with a heavy heart. She had always known Jake to be the strong one, the rock in their friendship. But now, she saw him through different eyes that recognized the vulnerability and pain he had kept hidden all these years. But the true weight of their past, their shared history, was something neither of them had truly faced until now. There was so much left unsaid between them, things neither had ever resolved. Their friendship, which had once been so simple and pure, was now fraught with unspoken feelings, regrets, and lost opportunities. The conversation that was never had. One evening, after the hospital had quieted down and the nurses made their rounds, Emma sat beside Jake's bed as the sun set, casting a golden glow through the window. The quiet hum of the hospital seemed to add to the weight of the moment. I've been thinking a lot, Jake said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned his head slightly to look at Emma, his eyes tired but still holding a spark of something she recognized, something familiar. Emma met his gaze, her heart beating a little faster. About what? About us, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I know it's been years, and a lot has changed, but I never really got over you, Emma. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't find the right words. The weight of his confession hung heavily in the air between them. I never really got over you either, she said quietly, her voice trembling. But we were so young, Jake. And I left. I left you and everything behind to chase something I thought I wanted. I thought I was making the right choice, but now, I don't know anymore. Jake closed his eyes, the pain of those words hitting him harder than he had anticipated. I thought about you all the time, you know. Even when I tried to move on, you were always there, in the back of my mind. And now here we are, so many years later. I guess I always wondered what might have happened if I had just told you how I really felt. Emma's heart ached as she reached for his hand, her fingers gently brushing his. I don't know why we never talked about it. We had so many chances, but we never said the things that mattered the most. It's too late now, Jake said softly, a small rueful smile playing at the corner of his lips. Or is it? The question hung in the air unanswered, as both of them sat in the quiet of the room, the weight of their unspoken words settling in between them. The love they had once shared had been buried under the years, but it was still there, waiting to be unearthed. The past and present collide. The next few days passed in a haze of emotions, as Emma found herself torn between the past and the present. She had come to Beaufort to help Jake through a crisis, but now she was facing a crisis of her own. The man she had once loved had never truly left her heart, but the woman she had become, the woman who had built a life in New York, who had learned to live without him, wasn't sure she could go back to that life. Jake, for his part, was recovering from his injuries, but he was also coming to terms with the fact that he had never really let go of Emma. The years apart had changed them both, but deep down, they were still the same people they had been when they first fell in love. The problem was, they were no longer the same people. Life had altered them, and they had to decide if they could fit back together or if their past was just too far removed to rebuild. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the life she had worked so hard to build was suddenly slipping through her fingers. The phone calls from her company kept coming in, urgent matters that needed her attention, emails that demanded responses. She couldn't ignore them. But at the same time, she didn't want to leave Jake alone. She didn't want to walk away from the connection they had started to rebuild. One evening, as Emma sat by Jake's bedside, her phone buzzed with yet another call from her assistant. She glanced at the screen, but before she could pick it up, Jake spoke. "I know you have to go back, Emma. You have a life in New York. You can't stay here forever." She didn't know how to answer. He was right. She had a life that was waiting for her. But that life, it seemed, no longer held the same appeal it once did. The thought of returning to New York felt like stepping into an old unfamiliar shoe. It didn't fit the way it used to. "Jake, I don't know what to do," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can just go back to everything the way it was before." Jake reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Maybe you don't have to go back. Maybe we can figure out a way to move forward, together. But I don't want you to stay here because you feel sorry for me. I want you to stay because you still want me in your life." Emma swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected Jake to put everything on the line, to ask her to make a choice. But now that the choice was in front of her, she realized it wasn't as simple as it seemed. The days were blurring together in a quiet haze. The cool autumn air was thick with unspoken words, and Emma could feel herself at a crossroads. Every time she looked at Jake, she saw the same man she had once loved, the boy who had been her best friend, her confidant, the person she had dreamed of a future with. But now, standing at the intersection of their past and present, Emma wasn't sure if the road ahead was one she could walk. It had been a week since her arrival in Beaufort, and the hospital room, which had initially felt so sterile and clinical, now felt like a strange sort of refuge. It was the one place where Emma didn't have to make any decisions, where she could simply exist. But she knew deep down that sooner or later, she would have to make a choice. The phone calls from her company were increasing. Her assistant, Kate, had left multiple messages. There were urgent matters to attend to, important meetings, and deadlines that Emma couldn't ignore forever. The company needed her, just as the people who relied on her needed her. But Jake needed her too. His recovery was slow, and although he was starting to regain some strength, he still depended on Emma for both physical and emotional support. And so, Emma found herself stuck in a tug-of-war between her life in New York and the life she was starting to build here, in this small town with Jake. The old flame, the new life. One afternoon, Emma decided to take a walk around Beaufort. She needed some time to clear her head and think things through. The streets of the town had changed, but they still held the same warmth she remembered. The houses, though slightly weathered by time, had the same charm. She passed by the old diner where she and Jake had spent countless summer evenings, talking about their hopes and dreams. It was all so familiar, and yet, everything felt foreign now. She found herself standing in front of the house she had grown up in, the one with the white picket fence and the porch swing where she and Jake used to sit and talk for hours. The house looked almost the same, but in her heart, Emma knew that it could never be the same. The years had taken their toll, and so had the choices she had made. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Kate again, this time with a text. "Emma, you have to make a decision. The board meeting is tomorrow, and they need your answer on the merger proposal. Please call me as soon as you can." Emma's stomach churned. The merger was a huge opportunity for her company, a chance to expand, to solidify her place in the industry. It could be the breakthrough she needed to take her business to the next level. But to do that, she would have to go back to New York. To leave Jake behind. She walked back to the hospital, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her chest. As she entered Jake's room, she found him sitting up in bed, propped up by pillows. He looked stronger today, his face less pale, and his smile more genuine. But there was a shadow in his eyes, one that told Emma he knew something was wrong. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside him. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Jake replied, offering her a small smile. "But I think I know what's going on in your head, Emma." She frowned, meeting his gaze. "What do you mean?" "I can see it in your eyes. You're torn. You've got your life back in New York, your company, your work, and you're thinking about leaving here. About leaving me. Jake's voice was steady, but there was a hint of sadness in it. Emma felt a pang of guilt wash over her. Jake, I don't want to leave you. I don't. But I have responsibilities, things I can't just walk away from. My company needs me. My career. Your career, Jake interrupted, his voice growing more intense. Is that what you want? Really? I mean, look at you, Emma. You've built something amazing, I'm sure. But is it worth it if you're not truly happy? If it means sacrificing the one thing that's always mattered to you? Emma was silent for a moment, taken aback by the weight of his words. She had never been asked that question before, not in such a direct way. Her entire life had been built on the belief that success in her career would fill the void she had carried since her divorce. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. Her heart had always yearned for more than just professional success. She had yearned for love, for connection, for something real. I don't know what I want anymore, Emma said softly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I thought I did, but now everything feels so unclear. Jake reached out, taking her hand in his touch warm and comforting. It's okay not to know, Emma. But you have to decide what really matters to you. What do you want out of life now? What do you want out of us? The decision. That night, Emma sat by the window in her hotel room, staring out into the darkness. The stars above felt so distant, like everything in her life. Her career, her past, her future, it all seemed out of reach, so uncertain. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Kate, urging her to make the call. But Emma couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she found herself reaching for the letter Jake had given her earlier in the week. It was a letter from when they were teenagers, one that Jake had written to her but never sent. It was full of his hopes for their future, dreams of traveling the world, of growing old together, of never letting go of each other. She had read it before, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like a piece of the past she could still cling to, a reminder of what was once pure and real. Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched the letter in her hands. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe they could still have a future together, a new chapter. But would she be able to leave behind everything she had worked for? Would she be willing to risk her career, her independence, for love? The answer, as it turned out, was not as hard as she thought. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Emma's hotel room, casting soft shadows on the floor. The decision she had put off for days now seemed inevitable. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, this mix of dread and anticipation. It was as though the universe had conspired to make her face the choice she had been avoiding for years. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her phone buzzed once more. The message was brief, but it hit her like a ton of bricks. Board meeting in 1 hour. Please call with your decision. Emma stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the call button. For a moment, she wondered if she could just push the decision aside, pretend it wasn't happening. But deep down, she knew that wouldn't work. She couldn't keep running from this. It wasn't just about her company or her career anymore. It was about her happiness, her future, and the life she wanted to build with Jake. She stood up, pacing the room as her mind raced. What did she want? She had spent so many years buried in work, thinking it would fulfill her, that she had forgotten how to listen to her heart. And now, her heart was telling her something entirely different. Jake. She closed her eyes, remembering his face, the warmth in his eyes, the way he had looked at her when he asked her to stay. The connection between them hadn't just reignited, it had grown even stronger. But was it enough? Could she leave everything behind to start over? Was she willing to risk it all? Emma took a deep breath, reaching for her phone. The call felt like the hardest thing she had ever done, but she had no choice. She tapped the screen, and within seconds, Kate's voice came through the speaker. Emma, we've been waiting for your decision, Kate said, her voice professional, but Emma could hear the underlying urgency. I know, Kate. I'm sorry I've kept you all waiting. I've been thinking about everything, and I need to step away from the company for a while. I can't focus on the merger right now. I need time to figure things out. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Emma could hear Kate processing the information. Then finally she spoke. Are you sure about this, Emma? You've worked so hard to get here. This merger is a huge opportunity. I understand that you've been under pressure, but walking away now, it could cost you everything. I know, Emma replied, her voice soft but resolute. "But I've come to realize that I've been chasing success for so long that I've lost sight of what matters. I've been living for everyone else, my career, my company, my responsibilities. But I need to live for myself now. And I need to figure out what that means." Kate didn't respond immediately. Emma could hear her sigh through the phone. "I get it, Emma. You've always been a fighter, always pushed yourself to the limit. But don't make any rash decisions. Just promise me you'll think it through." "I will. Thank you, Kate." Emma ended the call, the weight of her decision settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't abandoning her career, she was giving herself permission to live a fuller life, one that included love, connection, and the freedom to choose her own path. The hardest conversation. Later that afternoon, Emma walked back to the hospital, her steps slow and deliberate. Her mind kept drifting to the conversation she knew she had to have with Jake. She had made her decision, but telling him the truth would be another challenge entirely. She entered Jake's room, where he was sitting in a chair by the window, gazing out at the quiet streets of Beaufort. His smile was warm when he saw her, but there was an underlying sadness in his eyes, as though he already knew what was coming. "Hey," Emma said softly, sitting down beside him. "I think it's time we talked." Jake turned his gaze to her, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on, Emma? You look like you've made a decision." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I have." "I was hoping you would," he said, his voice low. "I can see it in your eyes. You've been carrying this weight for so long. You're not the only one who's had to make tough choices." Emma looked at him, her heart aching. "Jake, I want to stay with you. I want to be here. But I also need to figure out who I am outside of my job, outside of everything I've built for myself. I've been running from this for years, and I can't keep doing that anymore." Jake's eyes softened as he reached for her hand. "You don't have to choose between me and your life, Emma. I'm not asking you to give up everything you've worked for. I'm asking you to come back to the person you used to be, the person who dreamed with me, the person who loved without fear. I want you to be happy, no matter what that looks like." Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek. His words, so simple, but filled with so much love, broke through the walls she had built around her heart. "But what about us? What about the life we had back then? Can we really have that again?" Jake smiled, squeezing her hand. "I don't know what the future holds, Emma. But I do know this: love doesn't have an expiration date. We're not too old, we're not too far gone. If we want it, we can make it work. We just have to trust each other." The leap. Later that evening, Emma walked through the streets of Beaufort with a new sense of purpose. The decision she had made was not easy, and it certainly wasn't without consequences. But for the first time in years, she felt alive with possibility. She returned to Jake's room, her mind clear. When she entered, he was sitting up in bed, his eyes bright with anticipation. "I've made my decision," Emma said, her voice strong. "I'm staying. I'm not going back to New York, not yet, at least. I'm going to figure this out, Jake. I'm going to figure out what it means to live for me again. And I want to do that with you." Jake's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and relief. He held out his hand, and Emma took it, her heart swelling with emotion. "Together," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "Together," Emma echoed, the word filling her with more warmth than she had ever felt in her life. She had made the leap of faith, and for the first time in a long time, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning light had a different feel in Beaufort. It wasn't the harsh, hurried rays of New York, it was soft, warm, and somehow comforting. Emma sat on the porch of Jake's small house, her legs tucked under her as she sipped a cup of coffee. The sound of birds chirping filled the air, and the distant hum of the town going about its daily rhythm seemed to put her mind at ease. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she had all the time in the world. She had made a decision, and now it was time to let it settle. Her life in New York felt like a distant memory, one that didn't quite fit her anymore. The frantic pace of city life, the endless deadlines, the constant pressure to succeed, all seemed so far removed from the peace she was finding here in Beaufort. Jake had been a steady presence in her life since she arrived. His quiet strength and unwavering support had helped Emma find her footing again. She was no longer the woman who had spent years pushing herself to the brink of exhaustion, chasing goals that left her empty. She was learning to slow down, to appreciate the small moments, to savor the simple joys that life had to offer. But there was still so much to rebuild. Not just her life, but her relationship with Jake. The years apart had taken their toll. They weren't the same people they had been when they were teenagers, and yet, in so many ways, they still were. The love between them was undeniable, but they had to learn how to navigate the complexities of adulthood, of responsibility, of the person they had become. The first step, Emma realized, was figuring out who she was outside of her career. She had spent so long defining herself by her achievements, by the company she had built, by the titles she held. Now she was learning to let go of those labels and embrace something simpler, something truer. That afternoon, Emma sat down at the kitchen table, her notebook open in front of her. She had always been a planner, someone who thrived on structure and organization. But now, she found herself wanting to approach life differently. She wanted to live with intention, not with an endless to-do list. She wrote down the words that had been on her mind for days: freedom, connection, love, purpose. She didn't know exactly what it would look like, but she knew it was time to start over. This time, it wouldn't be for anyone else. It would be for her. As Emma closed her notebook, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The decision to stay in Beaufort, to be with Jake, was just the beginning. The real work would be finding the balance between who she had been and who she was becoming. Rebuilding the relationship. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Jake spent more time together. They went on long walks around town, talking about everything and nothing, about their shared memories, their hopes for the future, and the small joys of everyday life. Emma realized how much she had missed this kind of intimacy, conversations that didn't have deadlines or expectations, just two people connecting on a deeper level. But it wasn't all easy. Jake, despite his easygoing nature, still carried the weight of his past, his accident, his family's death, and the loneliness he had endured. Emma could see the way his past still haunted him, the way he struggled to let others in. She understood it, but she also knew that healing couldn't happen unless they confronted their pain together. One evening after dinner, as they sat on the porch, Jake turned to her with a look of hesitation. "There's something I need to tell you, Emma." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had come to know Jake as a man who wore his heart on his sleeve, but even now, there were things he kept buried deep. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. I've been thinking a lot about the past," Jake began, his eyes cast downward. "About everything we went through together, and then everything that happened after you left." "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sorry I couldn't be the person you needed when we were younger. I should have told you how I felt, but I was too scared to risk losing you." Emma reached over, placing her hand on his. "Jake, you don't have to apologize. We were both young. We both made mistakes. We were never ready for what we had. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that we're here together, and we get a second chance." Jake looked up at her, a mixture of relief and gratitude in his eyes. "You're right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We do get a second chance. And I don't want to waste it." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. The past was behind them, and now they could build something new, something that was theirs. The quiet joy of every day. As the days went on, Emma and Jake's relationship deepened. They found new rhythms in their lives, creating routines that felt familiar yet fresh. They spent weekends exploring nearby towns, enjoying quiet afternoons in nature, and having long talks under the stars. Emma even began volunteering at a local community center, something she never would have made time for in New York. She started to feel a sense of belonging that she hadn't realized she was missing. The hustle and bustle of the city had left her feeling disconnected from herself, from others. But in Beaufort, she was beginning to find her place. The small-town life, with its slower pace and close-knit community, felt like a balm to her soul. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jake turned to her with a serious expression. "Emma," he began, "I've been thinking about something. I know you're still figuring out what you want, and that's okay. But I need to ask you something." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Jake hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know that I'm here. I want to build a life with you, Emma. I'm not asking you to have all the answers, but I want you to know that I'm all in. Emma looked at him, feeling her chest swell with emotion. I'm all in too, Jake. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to be here with you. I want to see where this takes us. The days that followed seemed to stretch on with a calm, steady rhythm, each one feeling more comfortable than the last. Emma had never thought she could slow down like this, never thought she could simply be without the pressure to always do more. But here in Beaufort, surrounded by the simplicity of the life she was now building with Jake, she was learning to enjoy the stillness. There was a beauty in it, one she hadn't been able to see before. The mornings were slow, with no early meetings to rush to, no urgent emails to respond to. Instead, she spent her time taking long walks, reading books she'd been meaning to read for years, and savoring every quiet moment with Jake. He had become her anchor, the calm in a storm she hadn't even known existed within her. But still, the question loomed in the back of her mind: could she truly leave behind the life she had worked so hard to build? Could she put aside her dreams of professional success to focus on something else, something more personal, more rooted in the here and now? For weeks, Emma had pushed those thoughts aside, but they had a way of creeping in when she least expected it. Her past life in New York felt like a distant memory, but it wasn't one she could completely escape. Her ambition had always been a part of her, had always driven her to achieve the impossible. It was a part of who she was. Could she reconcile that with the life she was now choosing to live in Beaufort? Jake seemed to know when she was lost in thought. He had a way of sensing when her mind wandered, and one evening, as they sat by the fireplace in his cozy living room, he asked the question she had been avoiding. The question. Emma, Jake began, his voice gentle but filled with concern, where do we go from here? I know you're still figuring things out, but I need to know. What's next for us? Emma took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. She looked into Jake's eyes, searching for the right words. She didn't want to disappoint him, but she also didn't want to lie to herself anymore. I've been thinking a lot about that, she admitted. About us, about the future. I think for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to admit something. Jake raised an eyebrow, leaning forward slightly. What is it? Emma hesitated before speaking. I've been holding on to this idea that I have to keep pushing, keep striving. I thought that if I didn't, I'd lose everything I've worked for. But now I see that I don't have to choose between the life I had and the life I want. I just have to find a way to combine them. Jake nodded slowly, his face softening with understanding. I get it. You've always been driven, Emma. But I think the real question is, what do you want now? Not what the world expects of you. Not what anyone else thinks you should do. What do you want? The question hit her like a wave. What did she want? She had spent so many years chasing someone else's idea of success, her parents, her colleagues, her own ambitions, that she had never stopped to ask herself what truly made her happy. What did she want in this moment, in this life? I want to be with you, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I want to build a life with you, Jake. I want to be present, to stop living in the past or for some future that may never come. I don't know what the next steps are, but I do know that I want to take them with you. Starting fresh. The next few weeks felt like a blur of decisions and new beginnings. Emma had already begun working on ways to bring her career back into balance. She knew she couldn't completely abandon the work she had done, it was a part of her. But she also knew she couldn't sacrifice her happiness for the pursuit of success alone. Jake had been supportive of every step Emma took, even when she wasn't sure of her own direction. He had always been the steady one, the one who believed in the possibility of second chances. He encouraged her to keep pursuing her passions, but also to find a rhythm that worked for both of them. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Jake shared something that shifted the course of their conversation. I've been thinking, he said, his voice quiet but serious. I know you've been working hard to rebuild your life here, and I think I need to start thinking about mine too. Maybe it's time I took the next step, not just for myself, but for us. Emma looked up at him, curiosity in her eyes. What do you mean? I've been running this construction business for years, Jake said. But I've been thinking about opening something new, something that reflects the kind of life I want to build. Maybe I could start a small design firm, one that combines my love for construction with a creative side. It's always been a dream of mine, but I never really pursued it. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had always admired Jake's resilience and his ability to dream, even when life had thrown him curveballs. "Jake, that sounds amazing. I think you'd be great at it. And I'd love to help, if you need me." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I want you to be a part of this, Emma. I want us to build something together, not just our relationship, but our futures. Taking the first steps together." And so, Emma and Jake took their first steps toward their new future together. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. There were still obstacles, both external and internal, that they had to overcome. But each day brought them closer to the life they both wanted to create. Emma didn't have all the answers yet, but she was learning to trust the process. She didn't need to have everything figured out. She just needed to know that she was moving forward with the right person by her side. As the days turned into months, Emma's life in Beaufort began to feel like home. She was still building her career, but now it was on her terms. She was carving out time for herself, for the things that truly mattered. And through it all, Jake remained her constant, her anchor in a world that often felt unpredictable. Together, they were creating a new chapter, one that was full of love, possibility, and the promise of a future that was entirely their own. The sun was setting on the small town of Beaufort, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange as Emma walked down the main street, her mind alive with thoughts of the future. It had been several months since she had made the decision to stay in Beaufort with Jake, and every day felt like a new chapter in her life, one she had never expected, but one she was beginning to embrace. The life she had built in New York, with all its chaos and ambition, seemed like a distant memory now. It wasn't that she regretted it, but the quiet simplicity of her days in Beaufort felt like a balm to her soul. She had found a rhythm, a balance, that allowed her to truly live, not just exist. She passed by the small bakery where she and Jake often stopped for coffee in the mornings. The familiar scent of fresh bread filled the air, and for a brief moment, Emma found herself smiling. It was the little things, like these simple routines, that had begun to make this town feel like home. Building their future. Jake's new design business was beginning to take shape. They had spent countless evenings brainstorming ideas, discussing possibilities, and dreaming together about what the future could look like. Emma had helped him with the marketing, using the skills she had honed over the years in New York. Together, they made a great team. The business was small, but it was growing steadily. Jake had started taking on small residential projects, designing beautiful homes for people who wanted something unique and personal. His passion for construction and design was evident in every project he undertook, and word of mouth was spreading fast. Emma was proud of him, proud of the man he had become. In the meantime, she was finding her own place in this new life. She had taken on some freelance work, helping businesses with branding and marketing, and it was fulfilling in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the corporate grind of her old life, but it gave her the freedom to work on her own terms. She had the space to focus on the things that mattered most: her relationship with Jake, her personal growth, and the new life they were creating together. The proposal. One chilly autumn evening, Jake suggested they take a drive out to a nearby vineyard. Emma agreed, excited for a quiet evening together. They had grown accustomed to these peaceful outings, time away from the pressures of life, time to focus on each other. As they drove through the winding roads, the golden leaves fluttering in the wind, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. Being with Jake, surrounded by nature, felt like the perfect way to end the day. When they arrived at the vineyard, the sun was just beginning to dip behind the hills, casting a soft glow over the rows of grapevines. Jake led her to a small wooden bench, tucked under a vine-covered trellis. He sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. The air was crisp, the evening settling into a comfortable silence. "I've been thinking a lot," Jake said quietly, his voice low. "About us, about everything we've been through. And I realize that I don't want to wait anymore. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Emma. I want to build a future with you, one that's full of love, joy, and all the little moments we share." Emma looked at him, her heart racing. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the depth of his feelings. She had known for a long time that Jake was the person she wanted to be with, but hearing him say it out loud was a feeling she wasn't prepared for. "Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want it to be with you." Jake smiled, his eyes lighting up. "So what do you say, Emma? Will you marry me?" Emma's heart swelled with emotion as she looked at the man who had stood by her through so much. They had both come a long way from the people they were when they first met. This was their chance to create something new, a future they could build together, one step at a time. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jake's face broke into a wide grin, and he took her hand, slipping a simple silver ring onto her finger. The world seemed to fall away as they kissed beneath the setting sun, the promise of their future together shining brightly in their hearts. A new chapter. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Jake's engagement brought a new sense of excitement and possibility to their lives. They began planning their wedding, a small ceremony in the heart of Beaufort, surrounded by close friends and family. It wasn't going to be extravagant, but it was going to be perfect, an intimate celebration of the love they had found, the love that had been there all along, waiting to be rekindled. As they worked together to plan the wedding, they also continued to grow in their personal lives. Emma's freelance work flourished, and Jake's business took off. They had found a balance, something that had always seemed so elusive in the past. Jake's business was expanding, and he had already started looking into hiring a few employees to help with the workload. Emma, too, was beginning to dream bigger. She wanted to help build the community around them, to create something that wasn't just about business, but about making a difference. The promise of tomorrow. One crisp morning, as Emma sat by the window with a cup of coffee, she looked out at the small town she had come to love. There was a sense of peace here, a quiet assurance that life, though unpredictable, had a way of leading you exactly where you needed to be. She thought about the life she had left behind in New York, the fast-paced, high-stress world she had once thrived in, and realized that she wasn't running away from it. She was simply choosing something different. Something that was more in tune with who she had become. Jake walked into the room, his eyes still sleepy but full of affection as he kissed her forehead. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," Emma replied, smiling up at him. "I was just thinking about how far we've come." Jake sat beside her, taking her hand. "Yeah, it's been a hell of a ride, hasn't it?" "It really has. And I wouldn't change a thing," Emma said, her voice full of conviction. "We've built something amazing, Jake. Not just the business, but this life. Together." Jake smiled, his eyes sparkling. "And we're just getting started." The day of Emma and Jake's wedding had arrived. It felt like a dream, a culmination of years of longing, growth, and healing. The small town of Beaufort seemed to glow in the warm light of early fall, as if the earth itself was celebrating their love. Everywhere Emma looked, there was a sense of peace and belonging that filled her heart with gratitude. The ceremony was to be held in the town's old church, a quaint stone building that had stood for generations, its tall steeple rising above the trees. It was a place where people had gathered for births, deaths, and everything in between, a place filled with history, faith, and love. It seemed like the perfect place to start the next chapter of their lives. The morning of the wedding. Emma stood in front of the mirror, her breath steady but her heart racing. Her wedding dress, a simple elegant creation made of lace and silk, hung perfectly on her frame, but she barely noticed it. She was too caught up in the overwhelming emotions that had been building up over the past few days. It was hard to believe that she was finally here, standing at the crossroads of her past and future. She turned to look at her reflection one last time. The woman staring back at her was different from the one who had arrived in Beaufort months ago. She was more content, more grounded, more open to love and all that it meant. Her eyes were brighter, her smile fuller. She had rediscovered a piece of herself that had been lost in the rush of chasing success. She was ready now, not just for this day, but for the life that lay ahead. There was a soft knock on the door, and her best friend Sophie stepped inside with a smile. "You look beautiful, Em," Sophie said, her voice thick with emotion. Emma smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Sophie had been there through everything, the highs, the lows, the decisions that had led her here. She had supported her when Emma was unsure, cheered her on when she needed encouragement, and held her hand through every twist and turn of her journey. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophie walked over, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "You're stronger than you realize, Emma. You've always been. But I'm so happy to see you with Jake. You two are perfect for each other." The ceremony. The church was filled with the soft hum of quiet conversations, the gentle rustle of clothing, and the faint sound of the organ playing a simple melody. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she walked down the aisle, her eyes fixed on Jake, standing at the altar. He was dressed in a dark suit, his hair slightly tousled, and his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When their gazes met, everything else faded away. The guests, the flowers, the music, it all became secondary to the way Jake looked at her. In that moment, Emma knew without a doubt that this was where she was meant to be. With him. For the rest of her life. As she reached the altar, Jake took her hand, his grip firm but tender. His eyes never left hers as the minister began the ceremony. Emma could hear the words, but they seemed distant compared to the feeling in her chest, the beating of her heart, the overwhelming love that filled every part of her. They exchanged vows, simple but heartfelt promises to stand by each other, to support each other through life's ups and downs, to love each other with patience and kindness, no matter what came their way. When Jake slipped the ring onto Emma's finger, the world seemed to pause for a moment, as if the universe itself had granted them this gift, a life together. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Emma's heart soared. She kissed Jake softly, knowing that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The reception. The reception was held at the local community center, decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers that Emma and Jake had chosen together. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter, dancing, and the sounds of friends and family coming together to celebrate the couple's new life. Emma and Jake shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying gently to a song that had special meaning to them, Your Song by Elton John. As they danced, Emma rested her head on Jake's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her cheek. I can't believe this is real, she whispered, her voice full of wonder. It's real, Emma, Jake replied, his voice low and filled with emotion. And it's just the beginning. The night was filled with love and joy. People came up to offer congratulations, share stories, and express their happiness for the couple. Emma felt surrounded by warmth and support, the kind of love that only comes from true connection. As the evening wore on, Jake pulled her aside, leading her to a quiet corner of the reception hall. There's something I've been meaning to say, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. What is it? Emma asked, her heart already full from the wedding day. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing, Jake said, taking her hand in his. I'm in this with you, Emma. All the way. Whatever comes our way, I'll be right here with you. We've built something amazing, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes us. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with love for this man who had stood by her side through everything. I feel the same way, Jake. I'm not scared anymore. I know we can handle anything together. They stood there for a moment, taking in the quiet peace of the evening, the world outside bustling with life but their little corner of it still and calm. In that moment, Emma realized that this was all she had ever needed, a life built on love, trust, and the knowledge that whatever the future brought, they would face it together. The future awaits. As the last song played and the guests began to trickle out, Emma and Jake stepped outside into the cool night air, hand in hand. The moon shone brightly above them, casting a soft glow over the town. Emma looked up at the sky, feeling a deep sense of contentment. She had found her way back to herself. To the love that had always been there, waiting for her to embrace it fully. There would be challenges ahead, of course. Life was never as simple as a fairy tale. But Emma knew that with Jake by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Their future was unwritten, full of possibility and promise. But one thing was certain, they would face it together. And that was enough.